name is Jake and welcome back to my channel. So today I am going to be doing my January wrap-up. I have not done a wrap-up in like 9 to 10 months. I'm pretty sure March of 2019 is the last time I did a wrap-up on this channel, so this is going to be the first time I've done it in a long time. And this year I'm not falling behind on them. That was my issue last year. I fell behind, I didn't want to do them after I fell behind more than 2 months, so I was just like, I'm not doing it again this year. So you're going to get a wrap-up every single month from me. Keep me to this, okay? You know? So basically, for those that don't remember, because I fucking barely remember, the way I do it is I talk about my least favorite book of the month, and then I work my way up to my favorite book of the month. In January, I ended up reading 9 books, which my goal is 10 per month this year, so I fell behind on one. I got over halfway through it, and I finished it in February. But I only finished 9 books in January, so that's all we're going to be talking about. Out of those 9, it was an okay reading month. I had no 5-star reads, unfortunately, but I had 2 4.5-star reads and 3 5-star reads, and then I had a 1, 2, and then 2 3s. So we're just going to jump into my least favorite read of the month, which is actually a book that I don't physically own. My least favorite book that I read in January was The Babysitters Cove by Kate Williams. And honestly, it might be my least favorite book that I've ever read in the history of me reading because it was that bad, but who am I to judge? Just kidding, that's literally what I'm here to do, is judge. But anyways, The Babysitters Cove basically just follows this teenage girl who is in this babysitter's club with her best friend, where they basically just babysit kids. Then she finds out that she has this power. She meets this new girl in town who also has a power, and it's just kind of about them figuring out what the fuck is going on. They're kind of learning about their pasts, and that's all there really is to it. There wasn't really a huge plot, to be honest with you. I don't think an actual plot really started until towards the end. It just wasn't it. The reason I don't own this is because I listened to it on audio, and I had an e-arc that I didn't listen to back when it came out because I actually didn't like it. But then I was like, I'll give it a try on audio. Maybe the reason I didn't like it is because I was reading it physically and audio will help. It didn't help. I still ended up giving it 1 out of 5 stars. My issue with it was, I had a few. First of all, the characters. All the characters were boring as hell. I feel like they all just kind of fit certain tropes, and the only character I really enjoyed was the best friend of the main character, and she wasn't even that prevalent, so it was just kind of whatever. But the main character was very annoying. This book feels like it was on the lower end of YA, but I don't think it was written to be on the lower end of YA. There's nothing wrong with being younger YA, obviously, but I just don't think that's what this book was going for, and going into it, I definitely didn't expect that, so I really didn't like it. The main character was really irritating to me. She made a bunch of stupid decisions, and I feel like a lot of what happens could have been avoided if she just wasn't stupid, but that's just me. There literally was no plot to it, and I think that's all I'm going to say, because honestly, I do not recommend this book. I don't think I've ever seen a good review for it. I hate talking about books like that, because obviously each book has its audience, so you might enjoy it, but for me personally, I didn't see a lot to enjoy, and everyone else that I know that's read it has given it a 3-star or under, so take that as you will, but I'm just saying. The next thing I read is the only graphic novel I actually read in January, and that was Survivor's Club by Lauren Bukes, Dale Halverson, Ryan Kelly, and Eva De La Cruz. I tried my hardest, so let me live. But I was so excited to watch. I actually never heard about this until I saw it on Book Outlet in January. I ordered it, read it basically right away, and I was hella disappointed. So basically this follows a group of 6 people who all survived some type of horror movie-esque situation back in the 80s when they were kids. One of them had survived a demonic doll came for them. One of them had a evil neighbor that kind of was killing people. A bunch of stuff like that, all different horror movie tropes. And this follows them as adults kind of getting together, and shit starts to go down again. That's basically all I'm gonna say. I don't know how to talk about my feelings on this. I did give it a 2 out of 5 stars, so it definitely fell very flat for me. But basically, my issues with it were I was confused. I was hella confused for the first part. It took me a lot to get into, and I kind of expected a lot more flashbacks to what happened to them in the past, because I feel like we didn't get a lot of background on the characters in their past. Maybe 1 or 2 of the 6 we knew what happened to them, but other than that, I think we should have known more about them. I feel like this could have been a series or at least a longer volume, because this is the whole story. This is all it is. But yeah, I wish we had more background on the characters. I was very confused with the storyline. I feel like it's just kind of shoved hella things together, and there's really 2 storylines going on. The group got cut in half, and it kind of followed each of their situations. And I could have even seen this being two different or three volumes, one for each of the storylines and then a third for when they come together, because this little volume did not do the story justice, and I'm still pretty bitter about it because I was really looking forward to reading this, but it is what it is. I gave it a 2 out of 5 star. Moving on to a anthology that I read, actually split between December and January, but I read the majority of it in January. I read His Hideous Heart, which was edited by Dahlia Adler? Yeah, Dahlia Adler. This collection is a bunch of retellings and reimaginings of Edgar Allan Poe and his famous poems and works. So it was 13 popular YA authors that all retold a different Poe tale. Once again, I feel like this fell flat for me. I don't know if it's because I took so long to read it, but honestly, I never really got completely into it. I was very excited for it because I'm a huge fan of Edgar Allan Poe. I was familiar with probably 10 out of the 13 stories that were retold in this, and this does come with the original tales too. So it's split in half. The first half is the retellings, and the second half are the original tales that inspired them, which I think was a really good idea to include these original tales because a lot of people probably haven't read them, so they kind of can read one or the other. Me personally, I actually was flipping. Sometimes I would read the retelling first, and then I'd go back and read the actual tale. Sometimes I start with the tale, and then I'd read the retelling, which is probably what I'd recommend to you guys if you haven't already read the tales, but what do I know? Why do I keep saying that? What do I know? I really don't know a lot, so I guess it makes sense that I'm saying that. This just fell flat for me. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I think my technical rating, when I added all the individual story ratings up and divided it, was a 3.15 or something like that. And that was on the lower end for my ratings. Usually I do give anthologies 3 stars, but this one, I don't know how to explain it. I gave it 3 stars, but I really didn't like it as much as I was hoping to. It's probably in my bottom end of anthologies. Most anthologies get 3 stars from me only because there's always stories I'm going to love, and then there's always stories I'm not going to like, and then there's usually the majority of them fall in the middle, which did happen with this one. I think it was just my expectations were so high going into it that I was destined to fail, basically. My enjoyment of this, that literally made no fucking sense. You guys know what I meant. I went into it with too high of standards or expectations, and I just came out disappointed. So I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. But I do want to shout out one story in particular. My favorite story in this was Night Tide by Tessa Gratton, which is inspired by Annabelle Lee, the poem, which is one of my favorite poems by Edgar Allan Poe. Probably my favorite, honestly. But it was very good. It was a female retelling of the poem. That's all I'm going to say. But I would say this anthology is worth checking out just for that poem. And I know a lot of people really enjoy this anthology. So I definitely do recommend it, especially if you're a horror fan or a fan of Edgar Allan Poe. But just don't hype it up too much like I did, because that's probably where I failed. Moving on to my other 3-star read. This one was actually a 3.5 star. But I read the first book in the Modern Fairy Tale series by Holly Black, which was Tithe. I read this at the beginning of the month, and honestly, I don't remember a crazy amount. Yes, I do. Why did I say that? I basically can tell you the entire plot right now. It all just came rushing back to me. This follows Kay, who is a character in the Cruel Prince series, or the Folk of the Air series. So I do recommend reading this before you read the Folk of the Air series. It's not mandatory, there's no spoilers in this for that, at least in the first book. But if you want a little background on a character that appears in the Cruel Prince, check it out. But this follows this girl named Kay, who her mom is in a band, was in a band, and then they have to move back in with her mom's mom. So her grandma's very strict, and she's kind of living in this small town when she finds out that she is somehow related to the fairy world. And all this stuff with the fae happens and stuff. I don't know what to say that isn't a spoiler. So that's all I'm going to leave you with. That's all you really need to know, especially if you've read The Folk of the Air. I definitely would give this one a try because I did not expect much going into it, but I was happy with it. I'm very happy with the first book. I'm definitely going to read the second and third book in this trilogy, but I gave the first one 3.5 out of 5 stars. And maybe if I read it before The Cruel Prince, I would have gave it a higher rating, but because I did read the Folk of the Air trilogy, this didn't live up to that, obviously, but it was still really good, and I would check it out if you want more in that world. Now we're on to the second half of this wrap-up, which is my 4-star reads, and my first one I want to talk about is The Chaos of Standing Still by Jessica Brody. This book follows a girl who is trapped in an airport on New Year's Eve because of a snowstorm, and she basically has to, what does she have to do? I don't know. You read it, didn't you? Yeah, I definitely did. Why am I talking to myself? She basically has to stick it out through the snowstorm in this airport while awaiting 10 a.m. the next day, which is when her best friend died the year previous in a car accident. So this definitely deals with mental health. It deals with grief. There's a lot of talk of therapy. and it just kind of follows her in this airport, kind of freaking out because she needs to get home, like, because she knows she's going to shut down when this time hits. But then she meets this boy in the airport, and things happen. You know, they might like each other a little bit, you know, a little bit of flirt, and it was very cute. And also another important part of this book that I probably should have mentioned before is her best friend actually sent her a text the day she got killed. She wasn't texting and driving, I don't believe. She just kind of sent this text, and it was the last thing that she got from her best friend. And her best friend, so the main character of this, hasn't opened it, even though it's been a year since her friend died, because she feels like that's her last connection to her friend, and she wants to hold on to it as long as possible. So that was a really interesting part of this, is her kind of struggling about opening up this text, which can solve a lot of her issues. And this is just a really cute book. I really enjoyed the writing style. It was very simple, like, it's all set in one day with flashbacks to the years prior, kind of her relationship with her best friend. And I really liked the main character in this. I was annoyed at times, I can't lie, because I feel like there's a lot of miscommunication in this, and also she took things too far. I never want to comment on other people's, like, issues with mental illness and, like, their experiences, but I definitely don't think a lot of her coping mechanisms were healthy in this, and the way she treated some people in her life weren't very healthy, but that comes with it. Like, I honestly, it was pretty realistic. Gave it a 4 out of 5 star. If you want a simple read, I definitely would recommend reading this around, like, Christmas and New Year's, because it just had that vibe to it. And, I mean, I don't know. Or just winter in general. This is definitely a winter read. Next up is an arc that I read in January, and that's The Night Country by Melissa Albert. This is a sequel to The Hazelwood. I didn't know what to expect going into this. The Hazelwood has very polarizing reviews. Basically, it just follows this girl who lives in New York City with her mom. Her grandmother ends up dying, who she never was very close to, but she knows that her grandmother wrote this fairy tale collection called Tales from the Hinterland. And things start happening in her life. She feels very unlucky. She starts seeing things and experiencing things, and she starts to realize that maybe these tales are more than she thought they were. Personally, I really enjoyed The Hazelwood. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Obviously, I liked it enough to request the arc for the second book. And I also gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, but this one's actually a higher 4 than The Hazelwood, but it's still like a 4, like a 4.25 out of 5 stars. But obviously, I'm not going to talk about what this is about because it would be spoilers for the first book. But I enjoyed this a lot. I do think characters that were in the first book that are also in this toughened a lot, and it was interesting to see, like, the after, what happened after the results of the first book, how people dealt with it. I'm trying to think of how to talk about this without spoiling it. What this book is about, I wanted. Like, after The Hazelwood was written, I wanted a book that basically is what this book is. That's all I'm going to say. If you've read it, you probably know what I'm talking about. But I just really enjoyed the direction that the author took with this series. It kind of went from, like, a fairy tale urban fantasy to a murder mystery urban fantasy. So if you're into that kind of thing and didn't enjoy The Hazelwood, I definitely think you might like The Night Country. The writing is very similar, but it does have a darker tone to it in this, and The Hazelwood already was pretty dark, so that says a lot. But I wouldn't completely write this off. Give it a chance if it sounds like something you might like, but I really enjoyed it. 4 out of 5 stars. In January, I also ended up reading my first true crime book. I'm very into true crime. I've been listening to podcasts, I watch a lot of documentaries, but I've never read a true crime book. So I decided, why not start with the queen of true crime herself and read The Stranger Beside Me by Anne Rule. This is a chunker. This is almost, wait, how many? This is like 550 pages. And I was very intimidated going into it. Me and one of my best friends, Brendan, we decided we're going to read a true crime book every month. And this was what we read in January. We're actually going to be reading Without a Doubt by Marcia Clark, I believe, in February. But this was really good. I mean, I honestly am pretty familiar with the Ted Bundy case. I mean, I feel like everyone that's into true crime is. But I'm not as familiar with it as I am with a lot of cases, so I feel like this was a really good read for me because I learned hella. So definitely, if you're into true crime, I definitely recommend giving this a read. Like I said, I listened on audio, and I really think the audiobook was, like, it was really good. It just felt like I was listening to a podcast, honestly, because there's a lot of information about true crime, and this goes in detail about it, like, very in detail. Sometimes overly detailed, which is why I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, because sometimes I feel like there was too much, and it kind of would take me out because she would focus on such little things and go very much into detail about those things, and I'm kind of like, we didn't need this, you could have moved on to the next part. But other than that, I really enjoyed this. There also is like 2 different afterwards in this, which makes sense because the case, when she finished this book, the case was technically still happening, but I guess I should tell you guys like what this is about outside of just like the Ted Bundy case. Basically, Anne Rule actually worked with Ted Bundy at like a mental health / emergency hotline. So she knew Ted Bundy personally, and she's always said that she was completely shocked by the fact that Ted Bundy was the murderer. So this is a whole new perspective on that case. So even if you are very familiar with it and haven't read this, I definitely recommend checking it out because it's an angle that I guarantee you haven't heard before. Very good, honestly. I was going between a 4 and a 5 star, but I ended up landing on 4 because, like I said, very detailed, and I kind of didn't like how detailed it got at points, but like it wasn't too bad, obviously. I still gave it a 4 out of 5 star. And it focuses a lot on the trial, too, at the end. Ted Bundy was actually kind of his own lawyer at part, so it kind of talks about his trial and like not technically his own lawyer, but he was trying to play the role as basically everyone in his case. So there's a lot to dissect in this book. I definitely still think about it now because he did some things. And if you want to read this, I definitely recommend it. Now we're on to my 2 4.5 out of 5 star books. The first is an e-arc that I read, so I don't own it, and that is The Other People by C.J. Tudor. This book did come out January 28th, so it's out now. And it's Lala's pick for her new book club, the Literally Dead Book Club, in February, so that's even more incentive to pick it up because she's going to be doing a live show at the end of the month about it. I really enjoyed The Chalkman by C.J. Tudor, which came out in 2018, I want to say. I haven't read her second book, The Hiding Place, yet, but I decided I wanted to read The Other People, and very happy that I did. I think I enjoyed it a little bit more than The Chalkman. Both of them got 4.5 out of 5 stars, so she still hasn't written a 5-star novel for me yet. Who knows, The Hiding Place might be, but yeah, so she's kind of become one of my favorite thriller authors, even though I haven't 5-starred anything yet, but she's getting there. Like, it's gonna happen. I wouldn't be surprised if her next book's a 5-star. But basically, The Other People follows this man who, his wife and daughter were said to be murdered, I want to say 3 years before, but he swears up and down that his daughter wasn't actually murdered because he saw her in a van while he was driving on the expressway. So he thinks she was abducted. The police are trying to say she was murdered, so he's trying to figure out like what the fuck was happening. And this book actually follows 3 different perspectives. It follows him, it follows a waitress who works at one of the restaurants that he stops at oftentimes, because the book basically completely takes place on a expressway. What are they called? Motorway? I don't know exactly what they're called, but it's a lot of driving, it's a lot of truck stops and that kind of thing. So the second perspective is a waitress who kind of has an idea of what might have happened, and then the third perspective follows a woman who is on the run with her daughter. And it was a lot, and I mean that in a good way. Like, it was a lot in a good way. It hit all the marks for me. It started off kind of slow, which I enjoy for thrillers, like a lot. It kind of, you're getting the story little by little, and there was things that happened in it that like I did not see coming but made so much sense and worked so well for the plot that I loved it. I literally loved it so much. The ending was A+++. Like, I loved the ending. This might be more of a, I don't know. My opinions on this might change in the future. It might get a 5-star from me. For now, I'm sticking with 4.5 star because there were points when I kind of was like, get on with it already. Like, there are specific characters in here that I don't think added a lot to it, but it was good. It was a trip. If you enjoy thrillers, I definitely say check it out, or just check C.J. Tudor out in general, because I do think she's going to become like a force in the thriller genre soon, if she isn't already. I don't know if she's very popular. I don't see a crazy amount of people talk about her, but she's like known, so we'll see. And then my favorite book of the month is Stay Sexy and Don't Get Murdered by Karen Kilgariff and Georgia Hardstark. So I read 2 nonfiction books this month, which is kind of crazy. One of which was a true crime book, and then this one's how-to guide / memoir. Basically, if you don't know who Karen and Georgia are, they run the podcast My Favorite Murder, which is my favorite podcast, like by far. I love it. Basically, each episode, they just each to walk you through a murder that's happened. Sometimes it's a murder, sometimes it's a survival story, sometimes all kinds of, they're all true stories, and they give their commentary on it. They're both comedians. Well, Karen's a professional comedian, but Georgia's funny as hell too. So they're giving their like comments and jokes about it, and it's really good. If you don't like dark humor, then definitely it's not the podcast for you. But Other than that, I feel like it's pretty good for everyone, especially if you're trying to get into true crime. They're actually what got me into true crime as much as I am now, so I definitely recommend it. This is basically what it says. It's supposed to be like a how-to guide of how not to get murdered, but really it's just a bunch of like anecdotes and stories about their life. They do talk on points about like how not to get murdered, like fuck politeness. Don't feel the need to be nice in situations when you feel in danger. Just stuff like that. And it's a bunch of points, a bunch of stories from their life. I really don't know what else to say about this to get you guys to read it. I feel like if you're not already a fan of My Favorite Murder or Karen in Georgia, then this isn't for you. It's mostly written for their fans. But if you do want to get into them, I would recommend listening to the podcast and maybe listening to a few episodes of that and then reading this, because, like I said, it's better to get to know them before you jump into this. So that's my recommendation for this, and I love this so much. I give it a 4.5 out of 5 star. The only reason I didn't give it a 5-star rating was because I expected more murder in it, and there wasn't a crazy amount, but at the same time, that was kind of my stupidity for wanting that. So it was more so on my end than their end. I definitely do want to reread this in the future. I listen on audio. They both narrate it. I highly recommend the audiobook if you listen to this. Like, there is pictures of this, so, like, flip through it, but listen to the audiobook. Like, do yourself a favor and listen to the audiobook. That was really fucking weird. I haven't filmed a wrap-up in so long, and I don't know why that felt so weird to me, but I feel good. I feel like this is my return to booktube. I've been posting like once, twice every month for the past like 9 months, but I feel like I'm in it now. Like, I'm here, I'm ready to post content. I'm gonna do this, it's happening. I'm gonna stop talking because I don't want to hype myself up too much and then just fail. So yeah, but that was my January 2020 wrap up. I mean, 9 books, it's okay. We're gonna make up for it in February. I'm gonna read at least 11 books to make up for me not reading 10 books this month. I do want to read more than 11 though, but we'll see. I've already read like 2, so we'll see how it works out. But this is my January wrap up. But thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you've read any of these books and like your thoughts on them down below, because I am interested. I'm specifically interested in thoughts on The Night Country and The Other People, because I feel like The Night Country, especially because the Hazelwood has so many polarizing reviews, that I want to see like what you guys think of the sequel if you decide to give it a chance, because it was better than the first. That's all I'm gonna say. If that's the push you need to do it, then do it. I fucked up Gertrude. I'm so sorry, Gertrude. She's back in business. But thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you know, give me a subscribe. You might like it wherever the liking is if you feel like it. But bye.